Hey, welcome to the Upload Iceberg. If the upload is the content you see above the water as the viewer, I'll cover the journey and data behind growing a YouTube channel that you can't see in the murky depths below the surface. I'm Dan, this is episode 14. After hitting 3,800 subscribers on May 13th, I'm recording one day later on May 14th. Imagine that, coming in on time with this recording. And we're going to call today a grab bag. All of the topics that I have don't quite fit under a channel review, so we'll hit the channel analytics summary at the end, like we always do, and then hit a grab bag of topics beforehand. So let's start with the latest video that just came out. Since the last episode of this show, I did release one video, so pat myself on the back, doing the bare minimum, getting one video out every 100 subscribers. That video was the New Zealand travel review of the Canon F4 zooms, and it's titled Why Pack F4 Zooms Boring Emoji, Snoring Emoji, Yawning Emoji rather. The idea here is really to create some intrigue as to if these lenses are boring, why would you bring them? And there's plenty of reasons that I've covered in depth over and over and over on this channel. So this video partially is a rehashing of the greatest hits and greatest advantages that I find in these two lenses in the context of New Zealand travel. And if I zoom all the way out, the goal of this video was to try to practice again targeting some of that browse and suggested traffic. If I was targeting a video specifically for search, I wouldn't necessarily title and thumbnail this way, but I also imposed some self-constraints, not necessarily meaning to, but I didn't really plan this video at all before headed on this trip. Partially you see that reflected in the voiceover, but because this was targeted for browse and suggested traffic, I did want to experiment with a new style and try to give this somewhat of a weak storyline, a weak travel arc from my retelling of the trip. And we can see how that did in watch time in a second. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. This was kind of a new style, like I said, and fun to experiment with kind of eliminating this A-roll desk shot. I went on this trip, didn't go in with a set topic. What could I create after the fact? Just using the pictures and B-roll clips that I had taken while there. So if we dive into the retention, I think that might be the most interesting thing to look at from an experimentation standpoint. This was off to a pretty good start. That dip in the beginning that I've been struggling to combat, that was looking really good in the first couple days of the release. And then this has since kind of settled back into more of what I would expect. YouTube is telling us that this is typical retention after the 30-second mark. And you can see this is a pretty steep drop in those first 30 seconds. So if we look at more, we can compare this to other videos. It's doing pretty well as compared to videos of this length. So I do like to see that. YouTube has rolled out a few new tools for segmentation here. So we can break out our retention graph by subscriber and non-subscribers here. And nothing is super interesting coming out of this data, in my opinion at least. I've kind of gone back on the channel and pulled a few videos to look at the differences here. But non-subscribers are just going to give you less time, right? We see a break pretty early in this video after 15, 20 seconds between subscribers and non-subscribers. Non-subscribers are just going to give you less leeway in terms of keeping their attention. And once those two groups split apart in the retention, I'm never able to get that back. And by the end, you've got a difference of 17 percentage points, almost a full minute of average view duration. So not necessarily surprising, but definitely something to keep your eye on. You also have new and returning viewers. Same story here, just as you would expect. New viewers are just going to give you less leeway to get into stuff that's interesting to them. And they're making that judgment call after clicking on your video when seeing the title and thumbnail much faster than returning viewers. And again, never quite closing that gap by the end of the video. And I don't have any paid traffic to this video or any, so this segment is kind of useless to me at the moment, but wanted to touch on that rollout. Anyway, so overall, just kind of an interesting look at the retention when trying a completely new style. I wouldn't say I'm thrilled with this, but I'm definitely not upset. Overall, more just happy that I tried a new style. And, regardless of how this was going to look, I was excited to see how it turned out. With these videos that are targeted more for browse and suggested, what I've noticed is kind of like this big pop in the beginning where it looks like a super promising video and then a pretty hard logarithmic trail off in views. And this is no different than something like, we'll come back to this in a sec. This is no different than something like the Camera R6 and R8 camera bag 2024 video where I had the not a holy trinity thumbnail. Very similar This was more explosive in the beginning for sure, and then trailed off just as hard or harder in this long tail. What's interesting here, if we come back to the YouTube search terms, for this New Zealand video, we're seeing mostly Canon R8 so far, which is not a great fit. This is really a video around the 24-105 and the 70-200. You can see the search terms for the 24-105 f4, much better average view duration here. So I would expect these terms and hope that these slowly kind of rise to the top and that this video will get shown in search. But time will tell. I think YouTube has to keep experimenting with showing this for some of these terms and figuring out that if these have a higher average view duration and it's higher than competing videos, right? You can't look at your own analytics in a vacuum. If this rises to compete against others, then it might get shown. What's interesting though is we also see some Canon R8 search for this video as well. And there's not a lot of the actual content that focuses on the Canon R8. You can see that since the start, this Canon R8 traffic has trailed off and really all search traffic is dying down on this video. But this brings me to my next video, which will be a video around the Canon R8. And I think I will probably try to target that Canon R8 video for search more traditionally like I've done in the past, showing that Canon R8 either in the thumbnail text, in the title text, hoping to split the difference between something that's pretty searchable and generic for anybody searching the Canon R8, maybe Canon R8 for travel. I'm still playing around with that, but it's really tricky. I'm actually really struggling to formulate exactly what to say about that video. So I have some similar constraints on that R8 video as I had to this 24-105, 70-200 video. And that's because it's, again, same trip. I didn't go in with any kind of rigid content plan. So use the camera as I would typically use the camera, nothing out of the ordinary, no extensive testing, just not forcing anything. And so this video is really going to be a reflection of, okay, when did I reach for the R8, even though I had maybe an R6 on hand? Because of that, I think the R8 video is going to feature lots of images and clips from the R6 as well. So that's part of what makes the review a little bit tricky, is because it's going to be centered on the R8, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot around the 28mm pancake. This is the Sigma 28, by the way, the one that I think I'll keep. Also the 50mm, and yeah, just when I would reach for the R6 over the R8, because that came up multiple times. The other kind of tricky things that I'm battling with that video is not really knowing who you are, the viewer. I don't have a good sense of exactly who my subscriber is. We'll look at the polls that I've put out recently in a second, but this combination of factors, like focusing on not just the R8, not knowing exactly who to gear this review toward, and then, having taken shots and clips without a plan, I kind of feel like this will be a little bit of a disaster. But the goal is hopefully to build and take this a step further, this video here. But instead of focusing on the pancake lens, R8 is going to be the focal point, keying in on a little bit more of those features. It's also tough because this is a camera that I intend to sell pretty shortly here. This is kind of the last hurrah video. It's a camera that I promised myself I would sell 6 months after getting it. It's been at least 9, closer to a year at this point, and I haven't run out of use cases for it. This is something I'm going to dearly miss, but also something that I don't want to keep long-term in the same bag as the R6. It's just a little bit too similar. As I'll get into in this video, I find myself reaching for the R6 more on the photo front. And ultimately, my second body, when I settle on something and have the budget for something that I ultimately love, it's going to have to be a little bit more pro styled than the R8, even though I think this is one of the brightest spots in Canon's lineup right now. There's a lot of great deals on it at the moment. It's really compelling, but not the best thing for me to run alongside the original R6 Mark I. Now, on to these polls. The first one I sent out is, when you think about getting your next primary camera, if you do, if that's something you spend time thinking about, which describes you best? And what I'm trying to get to here is how much you focus on some of the more pro features, for example, having dual card slots. And 33% of you think your next body needs to have dual card slots, or you'd like to have them, but it might be tricky given how much you're willing to spend. That's a good portion, over 40%, kind of in that first bucket. And then everybody else kind of in the I don't care, or I'm interested in a smaller body with one slot anyway. So if you're hankering for the R8, you kind of fit into this bucket here. but I'm hoping this gives me a sense about where subscribers lean on this continuum. I don't do a ton of paid work, and the stuff that I do is a lot lower stakes than weddings. But for paid work, I like to do the majority, if not all the shooting on the R6 for this reason. When I found myself in New Zealand and you're in there in the moment and you have a choice between the R8 and the R6, knowing that the R6 has just one more additional form of backup, that's what I found myself reaching for. So do I hesitate to use the R8 generally? No. In those special circumstances, and in instances where I don't feel like I want to lose a memory card by chance, I'm reaching for the R6. It hasn't stopped me from using the R8 very thoroughly, but it is something that I do think about. And so top of mind for me. The other post or the other poll that I put out was to try to get a little bit of an idea of how many of you are daily versus weekly or monthly shooters. And I was a little bit surprised by these results. I think I maybe expected people to shoot or edit daily a little bit more, but the bulk of people are kind of falling in this 2 to 4 times a week or 1 to 4 times monthly, which, I did expect kind of a big congregation here. And then maybe I expected some more of this rarely bucket a few times a year to fall into the daily. 20% of people responding after 42 votes saying rarely shooting and editing a few times a year for special occasions, trips, or when I can. I think that this bucket, these 2 buckets are really areas where I would imagine people reach for the R8 most often. I feel like at some point you probably cross a threshold where if you are shooting, editing 2 to 4 times weekly, that's a big chunk of your life. And it probably means that you're doing some or a lot of paid work. Instances, again, where I think you probably want 2 card slots. So putting out these 2 polls back to back, I'm trying to get a little bit of a sense of how professionally or often people use their cameras here. So if you answered, I appreciate you getting your vote in. I'll probably try to ask a lot more of these more consistently just to continually get a better idea of who you are. The best way I found to do that so far and get an idea of this audience is to, just go through all the comments and respond to everything that's productive. That's what I've been doing so far. And at this size, probably can keep up with that for the foreseeable future. But yeah, thanks for chipping in if you have. I'm not going to turn this into a rumor show, but I do like covering some of the stuff as it's about to be peak season for Canon here. 2 rumored events, potentially one as early as tomorrow. I think we're looking at things like C70 Mark II, hopefully R1, R5 II, and a whole bunch of new primes, hopefully coming soon, as early as this week, potentially this month in May. If not, hopefully announced in June. Again, I'm not planning to run out and buy anything on launch day, but I am pretty interested after a lot of speculation for a long time to see what comes of this. And so I do check in with the ordinary filmmaker once in a while and catch up on these vids. Double speed, so that's cool. PolarPro released a new McKinnon filter today, Chroma VND, so a combination of circular polarizer and variable ND filter. These are interesting. The PolarPro stuff is great that I've used in my experience. Got the Peter McKinnon VND on right now, the 2 to 5 stop. There's a couple different variations of this. They are pricey. I feel like these are kind of best in class. I'll let you be the judge, but it would be cool to get hands-on with one of these at some point. Although, again, not adding this to the cart today. But that was a cool thing that I saw earlier. Continuing on the grab bag fashion of this episode, one thing I wanted to touch on is the question of why do you shoot or how do you share what you shoot? I had someone reach out on Instagram recently and ask me, where do I see my photography going? Kind of in the context of, building a portfolio, potentially selling prints. And that question just generally really caught me off guard. I think it's something that we probably all should be spending a little bit more time thinking about if you don't already. But yeah, I didn't have a great answer and still don't. I feel like personally I've made some pretty big changes to allow for career experimentation in the last few years. And one of the goals and one of the byproducts has been that it's allowed me a lot more photography time. And those changes have not all been good. I think, a lot of them have been tumultuous. Had various degrees of non-success so far. I don't know if it's all good, but I find that I have trouble committing to things long term. It feels like when I do that I'm saying no to a whole bunch of things. And that's exactly what's happening. But in the photography realm, kind of around 2021, that's when I feel like I committed to myself, like, hey, I'm going to try to make photography one of those things that I do start to try to get much better at. It felt like super high ceiling for learning, still does. I think any stage of your journey, it feels like there's so much at the top that you can keep chugging along and learning and digging away at, trying to build those skills. But yeah, purchasing that R6 in 2021 was kind of that moment where, I was going to give myself a tool that was flexible enough and capable enough that I could kind of jump into anything and could do so pretty enthusiastically, either at a hobby level or prosumer level for the foreseeable future. And I don't know where I'm taking it. Like, all of that to say, I just want to get better, and obviously have put a lot of time into getting better over the last couple of years. I'd love to get to the point where I could monetize my shooting, to be able to give up side work in favor of just photography would be awesome. And this channel is kind of the vehicle through which I can see myself maybe doing that in the near-ish future. But that's kind of the goal, to be able to create some side income with my photography, whether through this channel or other ways, to be able to fund gear, to fund travel. I think that would be awesome. So kind of thinking like YouTube seems like one of the slowest ways to monetize that. Like, obviously going out and shooting for other people and charging for that work is the fastest way to do so. YouTube seems like one of the slowest roads without any guarantee to actually end up working. But it is one of those ways that I feel like as a creator, you get the most control. And that's why I love YouTube, both as a consumer and creator, to be able to see others having a lot of control over what they create and to be able to create a side income, or at the highest levels, a living, is really cool. So that's sort of the default path that I'm on. I'd love to get this to a point where this channel kicks off a few grand a year and I could put that into occasional gear or occasional travel. I think that would be a really fulfilling thing to be able to, create at least or capture at least that value that I could use to further the hobby. The other related thing is how to share what you shoot. And YouTube is where I put most of my effort in sharing even just still photos. They're packaged in these videos. After Instagram fundamentally changed and shifted over to short form video content, I like experimenting with those and making them occasionally, but generally don't love creating short form and definitely don't want to get on a short form treadmill. So Instagram is the other thing that I use to share photography, but it's really kind of that memory timeline for me to see things in a grid. That should be my website. That should be a more polished portfolio. So I definitely want to start chipping away at that effort to kind of move like that memory timeline that I use Instagram for as myself. That should be a portfolio. I also did get a photo box, cheap little photo box from Amazon. I'm going to try to print a little bit more often. So just a couple things from New Zealand that I've printed out and put away. And I would love to do that with all projects moving forward. I was recommended White House custom color a long time ago from one of my Instagram followers, and I've printed with them a ton of times. This is not sponsored. I don't have an affiliate link or anything, but I get their deep matte prints. They're super quick to turn things around. They have their own ROES ordering system. It's an interface that you can upload your photos to and order prints directly. So pretty simple. The prints are great quality. These guys ship really fast. I've used them a ton of times. So I'd recommend, I don't know, if you haven't printed anything ever, you definitely should try. And this is a great way to get into it without, purchasing a printer yourself. That's something that I would love to get into at some point, but that's far on the horizon. And finally, we can just touch on like broader channel update and some of the analytics that we normally look at. So I'd say headline is I'm not quite getting the traction or making the headway that I was hoping to make in 2024 on this channel. Also from a number of videos posted. On one hand, that's disappointing. On the other, the goal is just to keep continuing at whatever pace is feasible and sustainable and just not quit. I think that's part of the game. From that standpoint, I feel great. And I feel good about the videos I have made and the experimentation I've tried, but probably will continue for the rest of 2024 to double down on kind of that strategy of making fewer, better videos, really kind of keep quality over quantity and experimentation on the forefront. So I would expect to see, definitely not more than probably a video a month for the rest of the year for sure. But hopefully they're good ones and aligned with travel as much as that's on the horizon for me the rest of the year. New Zealand's a big one, so not going to be doing a ton more travel this year as I see it from mid-May, but we'll see. We'll keep the fingers crossed From an affiliate marketing or sponsorship standpoint, I'm doing more experimentation with that kind of stuff on my hockey channel lately, actually. I found a really good partner in Conway and Banks. They have some great hockey bags and a good affiliate program. They've been great to work with. Partnering with them has allowed me to explore some new hockey tech that I normally, might not get my hands on so soon. So that's been really cool. I'm seeing pretty decent conversions on this affiliate marketing front. It's just been exciting to take some of this learning and think about how I can apply this to the photo channel. Hopefully when I find super well fitting partners, that will scale to the photo channel at a better size, which again, hopefully just keeps that engine going in terms of being able to try some new stuff, make some more content, go on more trips, keep the whole thing rolling. Now I've got about 10 minutes left on this memory card. So if we get to analytics, we've got our 28-day analytics period of April 16th through May 13th. I'm not exactly sure what the thumbnail for this episode will be today. I might have to take a random freeze frame. But for this period, we've got 24,000 views, up to around 864 a day. So up a good 100 over last time we looked at analytics. Watch time is at 1,100 hours, which is up considerably since the last milestone period. And seeing 100 subscribers, which is just about normal when producing videos at the rate that I do, at least in the growth patterns that I've seen lately. A spike from this New Zealand video, which was cool to see. That had a good subscriber signal after going out. The click-through rate for this period is 8.4, just about normal. That hasn't been changing a whole lot. And same thing with average view duration of 252. This is still kind of that tough nut to crack. I'd love to see how I can be more engaging, make good enough videos to keep people watching a little bit longer than that. But it's hard. That's the hardest part, I think, of YouTube, is how do you scale? Like if you look at this video, R6 versus R7 versus R8, this had the flattest retention curve that I've had in a long time. But it's hard to do that even for a 5-minute video, let alone to do for a 10-minute video. So that's the goal. You just got to keep getting better. For AdSense, $79 total for this period for an average of $283 per day. High day is clearly this $591, and a low day for this period might be that $210. $2.04 was the low for this period. If you don't know how AdSense works at this size, the minimum payout is $100. So these last couple months, 60, 70, 80, that means I'm getting an AdSense check of around 140, 150, 160 every 2 months, which is great. But again, kind of like this is the refresher that if you're playing the YouTube game, thinking about how your AdSense can grow, this is really just kind of gravy. To put things in perspective for this channel, and really for any creator, you're going to have a list of things that you're paying for. So for me, that's the Creative Cloud. I think that's probably $60 a month at this time. I'm exploring the new Artlist subscription instead of Epidemic Sound. So I'm seeing how I can pull in some of that stock footage and their other assets in addition to just sound effects and music. So paying for Artlist, I'm paying for Riverside, which I'm using partly for client work, but mostly for this podcast. I'm also paying for a transistor to host this podcast that I don't use for any client work. So there's a mix of these expenses that are things I'm using for personal projects and for professional work. So if you consider what all of those cost monthly together, AdSense probably doesn't fund this channel. It's not quite fair because particularly with the Creative Cloud subscription, that's partly what I need for work, not just this channel. But as cool as it is to see this AdSense coming in the grand scheme, it's still kind of at zero in terms of like channel financial viability. I think you really want to see, in my case, and most creators, I think you want to see this kind of $100 a month probably pays for like the bare bones one-man show production cost. Maybe not even if you're using a lot of other specialized software tools. That's all I've got for today. If you're new to the pod, keep your eyes out. I'm going to do a new episode every 100 subs until we get to 5,000. So I'll see you next at 3,900. The best way to support this show is to use the affiliate links below if you're interested in those services. As an example, this was the last podcast that came out. If you're interested in testing out new gear or you need to rent something for a trip, consider saving yourself 15% off at Lensrentals. That helps the channel and lets me rent more to review on this channel. And the same thing goes for other friends of the show like Moment and Recut. I'd like to continue making this show more valuable, so if you have questions or comments, please leave them. I like to pull them into episodes whenever I can, whenever they're relevant, and cover them more in depth than I could in just a single comment. Thanks for watching. Later.